Number 8. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. In the 1940s and the 1950s, prefrontal lobotomies were performed on more than 40,000 patients in the United States, and one location that performed them was the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. It would later be known as Weston State Hospital. The hospital was built to shelter 250 individuals, opened to patients in 1864, and peaked in the 1950s with 2,400 patients. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic was designed to be self-sufficient, including a farm, dairy, waterworks, and cemetery on their land. It eventually grew to 666 acres. Patients were brought to the institution for different reasons, including asthma, sloth, egotism, family problems, and even avarice. This resulted in an overabundance of patients being admitted, forcing the facility to run out of personnel and beds. In the early 1950s, Weston State Hospital became the site of the West Virginia Lobotomy Project. The state attempted to use lobotomy to lower the number of patients. Changes in the treatment of mental illness, as well as the facility's physical degradation, caused its closure in 1994, wreaking havoc on the local economy from which it has yet to recover. Joe Jordan purchased the hospital in 2007 and has offered it for tours and other activities to collect funds for its renovation. Number 7. Holy Land, USA. In the early 1950s, a dream started for John Baptist Greco, a devoted Roman Catholic. He took his dream of building a roadside religious theme park and put it into motion. By the end of the decade, he managed to build it. It was a representation of the city of Bethlehem in miniature. Over 50,000 people visited Holy Land only a few years after its opening. People came from far and wide to see a recreation of the Garden of Eden and other attractions based on biblical passages. His goal was to bring the community together by building a peaceful place dedicated to the life and work of Jesus Christ. It sits on Pine Hill in Waterbury, Connecticut. One of the park's most treasured staples is its steel cross, standing at 56 feet. The cross and the sign reading Holy Land, USA are two of their best-known features. Greco closed the park in 1984, hoping to update it. But unfortunately, he passed away in 1986 before he was able to do so. It was passed on to a group of nuns, and they kept it clean to the best of their abilities, but the park remained closed for good. Sadly, troubled kids had started making their mark on Holy Land by beheading statues, destroying dioramas, and blocking tunnels. It reached a more dangerous level in 2010 after a woman was killed there, making it a murder scene. The place underwent refurbishment in 2018. A massive cleanup was done, and a new LED cross was put on display that changes colors to reflect certain holidays or seasons. In 2020, it was announced that while the Holy Land is still not open to the public, visitors are more than welcome to walk through the park and look around. Number 6. 1948 Buick Streamliner. The 1948 Norman E. Timms Buick Special Streamliner, one of the most notable and inventive vintage customs, was destroyed in the terrible Woolsey fire near Malibu, California. The Timms Special, known for its swooping mid-engine style, was destroyed with roughly 30 other automobiles owned by noted collector Gary Cervini. As the fire raged through the north of Los Angeles, Gary lost his whole collection. The car, which was later called the 1948 Buick Streamliner in the 1940s, was made by Norman E. Timms, who also designed and built the original Model T Ford Model A, which won the Model A World War II Car of the Year award in 1947. The Timms Special won awards at the Pebble Beach and Amelia Island Concours d'Elegance, and it was even transformed into a die-cast model. It was also a regular feature at Southern California vehicle events, where its oddly elegant design drew a lot of attention. Days following the fire at Cervini's 21,000-square-foot home, the media promptly reported that his home and the entire car collection were a complete write-off. Cervini's Magnaflux Streamliner was saved from destruction by the LA fires of 1991 when he and his wife were out of town and the fire department failed to respond to the blaze. The fire department never showed up because their house wasn't a priority, he says. Cervini intends to use the chassis as the basis for his second restoration of the car. Number 5. Ludlow, Colorado. Over 8,000 Colorado workers in the coal mining industry got together to form a union. They worked for the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company, owned by the Rockefellers. The employees felt that they were not only underpaid, but that they also worked and lived in poor conditions, so they went on strike. The response from the company was to kick the workers out of town, but they stood their ground and set up tent colonies right next to the mines. The company hired National Guardsmen to reduce the violence between the miners and the corporation, yet they still terrorized and ran raids daily on the workers. In 1914, things came to a head, with the militia aiming fire. The miners responded to the shooting, resulting in an all-day affair. At the end of the day, the guardsmen torched the tent colony, burning it completely to the ground. Sadly, 11 children and 2 women were discovered dead from apparent smoke inhalation. Of the 25 people who died during the massacre, 3 of those were National Guard troops. The massacre caused a very dark turn in U.S. labor relations in which miners attacked anti-union officials, strikebreakers, and the mines while taking control of an area that was 50 miles long and 5 miles wide. About 50 people were killed during the retaliation for the Ludlow massacre. President Woodrow Wilson sent in federal troops to minimize any further violence. The workers' strike finally ended on December 10, 1914. The employees saw no significant difference in pay, but they recruited 4,000 new workers. Can you think of any other union strikes that happened throughout history? Mention them in the comments below and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 4. Cornish Estate Ruins. The Cornish Estate, a piece of New York history consisting of jagged stone, a stacked fireplace, and overgrown charm, sits in the woods in the Hudson Valley. Newlyweds Edward and Selina Cornish moved into the estate just outside the city in 1917. As president of the National Lead Company, Edward did well for himself and Selina. This allowed them to fill the estate with gardens, a swimming pool, and a prestigious mansion. Between 1920 and 1930, they often entertained guests with extravagant parties, giving them a place to escape from the bustling city life, even if it was just for a night. Tragedy struck in May 1938 when the lovers passed away within 2 weeks of each other. The estate was passed down to a nephew, but he never maintained the property, and in 1958 a fire destroyed most of the mansion. In the 1960s, it became part of Hudson Highlands State Park. A 2-mile hike is all it takes to get to the ruins, which are now overgrown and quickly becoming part of the forest. It's interesting to think that at one time the place was lively with music and dancing and laughter. Today, it's far from silent. People have claimed to hear the sounds of laughter and toasting glasses, a sign that the guests are still partying on the other side. Number 3. Plum Island Pink House, or the Spite House. Located in Newbury, Connecticut, an abandoned home sits out in the middle of nowhere atop a salt marsh. Its light pink color reminds people of a pretty sunset. The house is very popular with residents and has become famous in its little town as a local monument. Despite all of this, the beautiful scenery comes with an interesting tale. According to local mythology, it's known as the Spite House, a divorced man's history of having the last word on his ex-wife. The house was built in the 1920s when a local couple was completing their divorce. The woman demanded that her husband build an exact copy of their family house for her as part of the divorce agreement. Luck was not on her side because she didn't specify where she'd like it to be built. He agreed to her terms and went ahead and built the home as she requested. Under normal conditions, it would have been considered a kind gesture if he hadn't deliberately placed it on a secluded salt marsh. Salt water ran through the plumbing instead of fresh water, purportedly rendering the house uninhabitable. The home was used as a holiday getaway and was occupied by several different families after it was sold in the 1940s. It's been empty since the early 2000s. Prey birds such as hawks, vultures, and snowy owls are the sole visitors to the dwelling. There were plans to tear the house down, but a group called Support the Pink House gathered the community together in an effort to save an important part of local history. The group investigated the old tale in 2017 but found nothing to back up the outdated legend. The couple, Henry and Ruth Cutter, did live together in the house, and there's no evidence that suggests that there's another one identical to it. In November 1925, it's believed that Henry duped his wife into moving into the house with their baby, under the premise that they would be living a good life together, only to leave them alone for long periods of time. It's alleged that she was left with nothing at all while he went to see another woman or have dinner with his mother. Only a few weeks after they moved in, Ruth had enough and moved to her mother's house with her baby, but not before leaving the bed made for her husband. It was reported that it took nearly a decade for the divorce to be finalized, that he left her in poor living conditions, and that she often had to ask for rides into town from a neighbor. Number 2. Chicken Church. Daniel Alamjah was going about his business when he got a heavenly word from God telling him to build a prayer home in the shape of a dove. He felt the deep jungle of Magdalang, Indonesia would be ideal. That was about 400 miles away from his home. In 1989, he was in the region since his wife's relatives lived there. He was out on a walk when he saw the precise site in his vision and remained there all night praying, knowing it was the exact spot he needed to build his prayer house. It was originally named Gereja Ayam, but because of its appearance, large bird-like head and ornamental tail feathers, it was dubbed Chicken Church. By the early 1990s, it was open and ready to accept visitors. The church brought any religion under its wing, such as Muslims, Christians, and Buddhists. It wasn't just a sanctuary for religion. It also provided rehabilitation and juvenile outreach programs. By the early 2000s, he was unable to finish the project due to there being no money left. Daniel sadly had to leave his dream behind, and nature started to take over the chicken church. As the years went by, it became part of the forest, rotting along the way. Word eventually got around about the behemoth bird in the woods, and tourists from far and wide came to see what the fuss was all about. Money was put into it, the graffiti was cleaned up, and artists painted the inner walls with murals that tell stories ranging from history to mythology. A cafe in the back of the chicken church sells delicious desserts. And if you're feeling adventurous, you can climb to the top of the chicken's head and take in the breathtaking views. Number 1. ELKMONT Historic District. ELKMONT is a vacant little village that lies in the Great Mountains in Tennessee. In 1908, it started out as a logging town under the eye of the Little River Lumber Company. The company logged the great majority of the Smoky Mountains. Many homeowners spent a significant amount of time cutting down the trees that surrounded their homes. In 1910, the Little River Company began selling some of the land to fishing and hunting fanatics from Knoxville. These men turned it into a vacation town, equipped with cottages and a lodge, and it eventually became known as the Appalachian Club. Shortly after that, in 1912, the Wonderland Park Hotel was built, which overlooked ELKMONT. It had 50 rooms, complete with every modern comfort a person could want or need. For the next 2 decades, ELKMONT was on the up and up, becoming an exclusive vacation town for Tennessee's wealthiest. In the 1930s, cottage owners were given lifetime leases for half of their property after the Smoky Mountains became a national park. The lumber company sold 76,000 acres of land to the government, including ELKMONT. Others who were not within the boundaries of the park were forced to leave their homes. In 1952, these leases were changed to 20-year leases, which were renewed in 1972. When 1992 rolled around, leases were up and the National Park Service was legally able to demolish the homes. Unfortunately for them, that just wasn't possible, as the property was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Wonderland Hotel caught fire and eventually collapsed in 2005 and was cleaned up by the National Park Service employees. They left the rest of the structures behind for the forest to take over. Thanks for watching. Which one of these discoveries was your favorite? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.